Hey y'all, it's Jacqueline at Pixie Dust PhD. My partner bought me this awesome unofficial Disney Parks cookbook by Ashley Craft, so we're going to give our first recipe a shot here. To give an accurate reflection of the recipe itself, I am going to stick to what the book says to do as best as I can. That being said, I am a pretty adept baker, so I will probably comment on things that I would change along the way. Today's video, and my first recipe from this book, will be the beloved carrot cake cookies. This sweet treat used to be found at Ryder's Stop, but more recently has its home at the Trolley Car Cafe. That's the Starbucks location in Hollywood Studios. This recipe has us making both the cookies, which are a very cake-like cookie in my opinion, as well as the cream cheese frosting. That way, you can assemble yourself a little carrot cake cookie and cream cheese frosting sandwich to eat it up just how they serve it in the parks. We will start with the cookies. First up, ingredients. The book uses volumetric measures. I prefer weight-based measures, so I will list both here when applicable. For the wet ingredients, we have 1/2 cup or 105 grams of light brown sugar, 1/2 cup or 110 grams of granulated sugar, 1/2 cup of softened butter, 1 egg, and 1 teaspoon of vanilla extract. The recipe does call for salted butter. I don't own salted butter, so I just went with unsalted. Then, for dry ingredients, we'll need 1 1/4 cups or 150 grams of all-purpose flour, 1/2 teaspoon of baking powder, 1/2 teaspoon of baking soda, 1 teaspoon of ground cinnamon, and here the recipe calls for 1/2 teaspoon of salt, but I've increased that to 1 teaspoon to make up for my using unsalted butter. Then for mix-ins, we've got 1/2 cup or 50 grams of old-fashioned rolled oats, 1/2 cup or 40 grams of unsweetened shredded coconut, and 1/2 cup or 55 grams of chopped walnuts. And last we have our carrots. The recipe called for 2 large carrots peeled and shredded. I've got 1 large carrot and 2 small carrots. For reference, this was 211 grams whole, and then after I processed them via peeling, removing the ends, and shredding, I ended up with 120 grams of shredded carrots. I'm using a shredder attachment for my KitchenAid stand mixer to make quick work of these carrots. You can of course instead use a box grater or a julienne vegetable peeler. Once our carrots are processed, we'll continue with our mise en place. This is actually step 3 of the recipe, but I prefer to have all of this prep work done before we really get started. So we're taking our oats, coconut, and walnuts and processing until the consistency of coarse crumbs. I'm using a hand blender with a chopper attachment. You could instead do this by hand with a knife or in a proper food processor. Use your best judgment as to what constitutes a coarse crumb texture. It's definitely not as fine as sand, but we also don't want huge chunks of anything in our batter. Another baking quirk I have that I've been doing as long as I can remember is pre-processing my eggs. So in a separate bowl, I crack my eggs. That way, if there's any shell bits, they're easier to fish out than if I'd cracked my eggs into my stand mixer bowl containing my sugars or other wet ingredients. Also, I have had the misfortune of getting a bloody egg once in a while, so prepping my eggs separately also protects other ingredients from contamination in case you get a bloody egg. Once all of my eggs are ready, I add my vanilla and then mix until almost homogeneous. In my opinion, this step just helps make sure that the stand mixer doesn't have to do quite as much with the egg to make sure it's evenly incorporated. Next, we'll prep our dry ingredients. If I was feeling less lazy, I would sift these together, but today is a lazy day. So instead, I'm just combining my flour, baking powder, baking soda, cinnamon, and salt together in a single bowl and whisking together. This step is not specified in the recipe, but again, if you do some of this pre-mixing work, it helps ensure that your ingredients will be evenly distributed. I find this particularly important with baking powder, baking soda, and cinnamon because you definitely don't want an intense clump of any of those ingredients in a single cookie. And we don't want to overmix the batter once it's coming together, so doing some of the mixing now truly does help. So now we've actually got all of our ingredients prepped and ready to go. First real step in the recipe, preheat the oven to 350 degrees Fahrenheit and line 2 ungreased baking sheets with parchment paper and set aside. Next, in the bowl of a stand mixer, add butter, brown sugar, and granulated sugar. Using the flat beater attachment, cream together well. Also, if you're a new baker, creaming together butter and sugar usually takes a couple of minutes. A lot of novice bakers only do this for 30 seconds, and that's not enough. You typically want to see the butter become lighter in color and texture. Also, don't forget to scrape down the sides of your bowl as well as your paddle attachment thoroughly at least once. This is what my butter and sugar mixture looks like after thorough creaming. Next, you add your egg and vanilla and beat until combined. This shouldn't take too long. Again, scrape down the bowl and the paddle attachment. Then, the recipe has us sprinkle in the flour 1/4 cup at a time, followed by adding the baking powder, baking soda, cinnamon, and salt. Mine are already combined, so I'm just going to follow the classic method of adding my dry ingredients in 3 steps. Mix after each addition until things are just combined. You really don't want to overmix here. Once you start adding the flour and mixing, that's when you can form gluten. Those stretchy gluten strands are great in something like bread, but that texture is kind of off-putting for a cookie or a cake. So really, mix until just combined, and also recall we are still mixing in a few remaining ingredients, so we've got some more mixing to go. And as we've been doing this whole recipe, between each addition, scrape down the bowl and the paddle to ensure you aren't missing any dry ingredients. We're on to step 3 in the recipe now, which is to process the oats, coconut, and walnuts, and then add them to the stand mixer and combine. This shouldn't take long at all, and avoid overmixing. Then add your shredded carrots and mix well. Once you feel the carrots are relatively evenly distributed, scrape down your bowl and paddle, and that's the final batter. It's a pretty wet and loose batter, particularly for a cookie. For a cake, it's on the thicker side. Definitely a hybrid here. Now, if I were not following this recipe as faithfully as I could, I would probably chill this dough in the fridge for at least 30 minutes, if not more like an hour at this point. I can tell by working with it that this is a very wet dough. I'm concerned it's going to spread significantly in the oven. If we chilled it and gave the butter some time to set up, the cookies would spread less. But the recipe indicates to go straight from batter mixing to using a 1/3 cup cookie scoop to scoop dough onto your prepared baking sheets, then onto baking. So here I've got an ice cream scoop and I'm dividing my dough into roughly equal sized cookie dough balls. Because I am anticipating these will spread, I do want to place them fairly far apart from each other. The recipe calls for us to place the cookie dough onto the baking pan about 1 inch apart from each other. I am trying to exceed 1 inch. Also worth noting, the recipe says it yields 6 cookies total, which the final product is a sandwich of 2 of these cookies with cream cheese frosting in between. So at this stage, we should get 12 cookie dough balls to bake to craft into 6 final cookies. That being said, if you're going to use 2 sheet pans anyway, you should probably aim for 6 cookies per sheet pan. I ended up with 8 dough balls on the first sheet pan and 5 very complete dough balls on the second, with a sad and small dough ball of the remaining scraps in addition on the second sheet pan. So really, I got about 13.5 cookies out of this batter, meaning I probably could have made each cookie dough scoop just slightly larger. Use your best judgment. Now off to the oven these go to bake for about 12 minutes. I do also generally recommend flipping your sheet pans halfway through. For me, this means rotating both the pans from the bottom to the top rack, as well as rotating the pans themselves 180 degrees so the cookies that were facing the back of the oven are now closer to the front. In the meantime, let's make our cream cheese frosting. The recipe calls for 1/2 cup of softened butter, 8 ounces of cream cheese, 4 cups of confectioner sugar, and 2 tablespoons of heavy cream. I prefer my desserts to be lighter on the frosting, so I'm making a half batch. And again, I only have unsalted butter. You can certainly add salt to taste. Because I'm making a half batch, I'm going to take this 8-ounce block of cream cheese and only use half of it. The butter I have on hand right now is actually 1/2 so this is already the perfect amount. Then I've got 2 cups or 260 grams of powdered sugar ready to go. We will start by creaming together our cream cheese and butter until light and fluffy. Again, remembering to scrape down the bowl and paddle to ensure everything is being incorporated. Similar to the batter, I like to cream together my butter and cream cheese until they seem very homogeneous and are light and fluffy. The recipe actually just has you whisk together all frosting ingredients in one step. I'm breaking this down into a few steps. Like the batter, first cream the butter, then we're going to slowly add our powdered sugar. Do be careful when you turn your mixer on. Make sure it's on a low speed at first, otherwise you will get a cloud of powdered sugar in the air. The heavy cream is really just to adjust the consistency. Typically, if you are only using butter, cream cheese, and sugar, it will be quite thick. So use the heavy cream or milk or similar to your judgment to achieve the consistency of frosting you desire. Technically, I should be using 1 tablespoon here according to the recipe, but I'm just eyeballing it. And similar to our batter, I'm adding the powdered sugar in parts. If you try to add it in all at once, that probably will work. I just find it easier if we go in steps. The end result should be a fairly silky, luxurious frosting. Definitely taste test this and see if you want to adjust with salt or thin it out with additional liquid. but I'm pretty happy with this, so we're going to set it aside. Let's pull our cookies out of the oven, and as predicted, they spread a ton. They're very flat. At this stage, they're also very delicate. The recipe does indicate we should allow them to cool completely about 30 minutes. Presumably, this means on the sheet pan, so let's leave them be for now. If we try to move them to a cooling rack, I suspect it will be total destruction. The crumbs would be delicious, but not great for making this cream cheese cookie sandwich we desire as the end goal. About 30 minutes later, I'm back and just going to move the entire piece of parchment from the sheet pan to the cooling rack. You could also remove each cookie one by one, but I suspect these are still on the delicate side and I don't want to deal with that at the moment. I think it will be easier to peel each cookie from the parchment by hand than try to use a spatula to remove them, so that's what I'm going for. Once you've freed all the cookies from their parchment paper prison, it's time to assemble. Grab a cookie, slather on as much cream cheese frosting as you desire on the flat side, the side it was baked on, then pick another cookie to top off your carrot cake cookie sandwich. They are chewy and delightful. Definitely lack the cookie volume I was hoping for, but I do think that could be fairly easily solved with letting the dough rest in the fridge for a bit. I also personally would add some nutmeg, but overall I'd say this is a very solid starting point for a recipe and just needs a few tweaks to get it to perfection. Let me know in the comments down below if you try out this recipe and how it turns out for you. Also, do be sure to try the carrot cake cookie next time you're in Hollywood Studios. It's a delight. Thanks for watching. May the rest of your day be magical, and we'll see you real soon at Pixie Dust PhD.